who have liked and subscribed to the channel get in. Here is a comment from the previous video.
Story time about how I'm a homewrecker and I don't regret it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. As we were making out in his car, finally his wife called him. That's when I took his phone and I told him that he needed to give me attention. And just like that, it worked. We started going on dates and everything. Mostly just to the movie theaters during the day when no one was there. So now that I had him, I needed the next step was for him to get an actual divorce. Slowly, I started poisoning him against his wife. Okay, I know I sound super evil, but this was the only way I was going to be able to do it. And I did know that he was unhappy with his wife. Apparently, all she really cared about was the kids and not him at all, which I guess is understandable, but you don't neglect your husband after you have children, right? For 2 months straight, every single day I would tell him that he needed to get a divorce, and I showed him that he would be so much happier with someone like me. I had him wrapped around my pinky. Eventually, he started agreeing with me. This is when things really started to change. Whenever he'd get into a fight with his wife, he would come stay at my apartment. He had never done this before. A week later, he decided to confess to his wife that he was seeing someone else, which was the happiest day of my life. He asked her for a divorce, and she had no choice but to say yes. She still begs him to stay with her. Now we live together in an even bigger apartment. His wife hates me and calls me a bitch anytime she sees me, but I won. And yeah, we're already talking about getting married. His kids hate me though. What should I do about that? Go for your dreams. Bye. Story time about how I dumped my girlfriend when I found out she had cancer. Am I the bad guy? My girlfriend and I have dated for almost 7 years. In that time, she always wanted to get married, but I never really felt married, so I never proposed. 2 years ago, I started feeling ready and I decided to buy a ring. But unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer. She ended up having to stay in the hospital for a few months and underwent a bunch of therapy. All the treatments and everything were making her lose her hair, and I pretty much became totally unattracted to her. I know this sounds so harsh, but it's the truth. I struggled every single day as I fell out of love with her. When I talked to my mom about this, she told me to just have patience and to stick it out. But I just could not do it. I also didn't want to deal with having to take her to the hospital and helping her with the medication and helping her with the treatments. I wanted my own life. And suddenly I found myself having to drive her everywhere, feed her, clothe her, basically do everything for her. After a while, I asked her mom to move in with us to help me out. And this is when stuff started getting really bad. Her mom was basically taking care of her 24/7, so I pretty much did whatever I wanted. I would go out with my friends, and I even started dating other girls. Here's the thing. My girlfriend and her family have a lot of money, so I basically didn't have to work at all while I was with her. Her parents paid for our rent and pretty much everything we ever did, so I couldn't really break up with her. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I dumped my girlfriend when she got cancer. Am I the bad guy? My girlfriend's parents paid for our rent and pretty much everything we did. And of course, at the time, I didn't really want to get a job. So I really only stayed in the relationship for the money. Like I said in part 1, my girlfriend's mom moved in with us to help me take care of her. But I pretty much took advantage and decided to start dating other people. I downloaded every dating app I could think of, and I would go on dates every single day. I lied to my girlfriend and her mom and told them that I got a new job. This way I could pretty much stay out all day. So I found myself with all of this new freedom. I would go on dates and pay for everything with my girlfriend's money. I know you guys probably hate me right now, but it gets worse. After a few weeks, I ended up with 2 new girlfriends. So in total, I had 3 girlfriends. And I got really good at lying to each one and spending time with them. I'd see one of them every single morning and I would tell her that I was going to go to work. But then I would really go to the other girlfriend's house and spend the afternoon with her. And then I would end up going back to my apartment where my original girlfriend lived. And I would spend the rest of the night with her. At this point, she was starting to feel better with all the treatments. But I was just not attracted to her anymore. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I dumped my girlfriend when she got cancer. Am I the asshole? So at this point, I had 3 girlfriends at the same time, and I was getting really good at lying to them. But since I really didn't have a job and I only used my girlfriend's money to survive, I needed to stay with her. I just didn't find myself attracted to her at all anymore. So I decided to be honest with her and I told her that I wasn't attracted to her, just to see how she would react. She didn't even get mad, she just started to cry and beg me not to leave her. That's when she told me that she didn't want to be alone. But at that point, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was falling in love with my other girlfriends. Here's what I did. I went to my other 2 girlfriends and told them a new story. I told them that I got fired from my new job and that I needed a place to move in. I also told them that I wouldn't be able to afford rent. One of them basically kicked me out of her apartment, but the other one told me that I could stay with her for as long as I wanted to without having to pay for rent. So that's the girl that I went with. Then I went to my OG girlfriend's house and I told her that I just couldn't be with her anymore and that I had fallen for someone else. This broke her heart and her dad was really close to kicking my ass. They took all my credit cards and cut me out of her account. So I'm broke as hell right now, but at least I'm happier. Eventually I'm gonna have to get an actual job, so I'm still trying to figure that out, but my current girlfriend is paying for everything. And my ex is in remission now, which actually does make me happy for her. I'm about to get murdered in the comments, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time and trigger warning for this. My mom and dad got pregnant with me when they were only 16. They were both young and irresponsible. My mom wanted to keep me, but my dad didn't. My dad basically broke up with my mom and told her that if she wanted to have me, she would have to do it on her own. So my mom did. Luckily, my grandma helped her out a lot and she was able to stay in school. As a baby, my dad would visit me every now and then, but he wasn't really involved in my life as far as my mom says. Here's a little backstory on my dad. My dad grew up in a really strict family and he was expected to graduate and become a doctor. So that's pretty much exactly what he did. During the time that he was in college, he really didn't come see my mom or I, but of course my mom and him kept in contact. When my dad, or should I say husband, graduated from medical school, he finally got married. And of course this was hard for my mom because she thought eventually they would get back together. By the time my dad remarried, I was about 12 years old. I didn't have a relationship with him at the time and it didn't bother me. I was so busy with friends in school I never really thought about him. Not until I turned 14. This is when things started changing and I told my mom that I really wanted to talk to my dad. So he and I started talking on the phone and eventually he came to visit me. But things started changing when I turned 19. He actually ended up getting a divorce and he and I would spend more and more time together alone. Part 2 is story time about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time and trigger warning for this. When I turned 19 is when my dad and I started spending more time together alone. Or should I say my husband. Keep in mind, I really didn't have a relationship during my teen years. We only spoke on the phone a few times and he would visit every now and then, but not a lot. When I turned 19, I was living in college and I was closer to my dad. So I decided to reach out to him and ask him if he wanted to have dinners every now and then, and he said yes. The first time we went out to dinner, we actually had a lot of fun, and it really didn't feel like I was hanging out with my dad. It was more like I was hanging out with a friend. We just didn't have that father-daughter dynamic. We would meet up almost every single weekend, and our relationship was actually very friendly. We would make each other laugh and talk about everything. And this is when we realized that we had a lot in common. Eventually, he asked me if I was dating anyone, and I told him I wasn't. When I got home, I started realizing that I wasn't thinking about my dad like a dad. I was thinking about him like a man. So the next time I saw him, I decided to tell him that. And that's when he told me that he didn't see me like a daughter either. It took a lot of courage for me to tell him this. So that's when things started to really change between us. Every time we would hang out after that, it was more like a date. We started getting to know each other and he would hold my hand every now and then. And a few weeks later, we had our first kiss. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I married my father. Disclaimers is not my story time and trigger warning for this. After our first kiss, everything changed. We didn't think of each other as father-daughter. And of course, our relationship began to get more serious. And one thing we kept discussing was, should we tell our family or should we just keep it secret? So we kept it secret for almost a full year. I told my mom that I was dating someone, but I wouldn't tell her who it was. Also, a little side note, my mom and dad didn't have any contact between them at this time. My mom was actually married to someone else and they were very happy. But for me, it was getting to the point where I needed to tell somebody. Because yes, part of me felt that this was really wrong, but the other part of me felt that it was just right. I had never met anybody like him before. So I decided to tell my grandma. And she nearly had a heart attack. She called my mom right away and told her the truth. That's when my mom came over and we talked for a few hours. I explained to them everything and they still didn't agree with me. My mom called my dad and they got into an epic fight. I was totally expecting this, but it really hurt. My mom and grandma were totally against the relationship. That's when they told me that they would never speak to me again if I kept the relationship going. A few months later, we decided to get married privately. I didn't tell my mom. She actually found out through my best friend who was totally against our relationship as well. And she pretty much tells my mom everything I tell her. It's been 2 years since we got married and part of me still feels guilty and like I did something really wrong. But now it's getting even worse because I actually met someone who's my age and is not related to me. But I don't have the heart to break up with my husband/dad. I told my mom about this new guy and she really wants me to get a divorce. I feel like all along I was just looking for the love of a man because I didn't get that from my dad. Now that I'm seeing someone else, I'm realizing how wrong what I did was. But I don't want to break my dad/husband's heart. How can I fix this? What should I do?
Am I the asshole for cheating on my husband with his brother? Disclaimer, this is not my story time with sending me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 3 years, but my husband's always been very boring and kind of bland. The crazy thing is that I was the one that chased him and wanted to be in a relationship. I was 20 years old when we met and I met him through a friend. He was kind of charming when I first met him, but what I really liked about him was that he was a doctor, he owned 2 houses and a beach house, and he seemed like a really responsible guy. Before him, I only ever met broke guys, so when I met him, I was like, oh my god, this guy could be it. Oh, and the other thing is that he's extremely shy, so he was not about to make a move on me or even talk to me, so I convinced my friend to invite us all out to dinner so that I could get a chance to talk to him. Throughout the entire dinner, he was so shy he basically avoided me. But then after the dinner, he told my friend that he thought I was cute, so I knew that I could win him. After that, we only saw each other at friends' parties, so on one occasion, I decided to just throw myself at him. I kissed him and I waited for his response. He said, thank you. He finally asked me out on a date and it was okay. I could definitely see me living my life with him. Obviously a boring one, but you know, whatever. We were engaged for 6 months and we started living together after that. He basically lets me do whatever I want with his money, and he also helped me open up my own business. So no, I'm not just living off of his dime, okay? Fast forward to quarantine, his brother came to live with us. And this is when things got really, really complicated. His brother is the total opposite, makes me laugh and we have so much fun together. Like, really good fun. Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for cheating on my husband with his brother? Disclaimer, this is not my story time with sending me on Instagram. So his brother moved in with us during quarantine. And as soon as he moved in, I was finally laughing and having fun. Like I said, my husband was really boring and shy. So you can imagine, like, even in bed, he was super boring. Like, he never wanted to do it. And if I ever asked him to, he would just say he was tired. So I got really sick of that. When his brother came to live with us, he would make jokes, we would laugh. He basically made me feel alive again. Here's how things went down with him. My husband loves to go golfing with his golfing buddies, so he would leave every single day for like 2 to 3 hours just to do that. So I was pretty much all by myself all day. He would also spend a lot of time where he worked at a hospital. On the other hand, his brother was home all the time. He and I would watch movies. He even started helping me out with my online business, and soon we became really good friends. I would tell him everything. I would even complain about how boring his brother was. One night we decided to have pizza and wine, and between us we both had 3 bottles. Throughout the movie we kept laughing, and every time I would just get closer and closer to him. Eventually I was sitting right next to him. That's when we look at each other and we just started macking on. It was uncontrollable passion and I didn't know how to stop. And we ended up doing it. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for cheating on my husband with his brother? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. As we were making out on the couch, I just kept thinking how much better my life would be with him, as opposed to his boring brother. One thing led to another and we ended up doing it. And it was magical. And then every single day after that, we would kind of just smile at each other. When my husband was at home, he would steal kisses from me. If I was sitting on a chair, he would come by and quickly tickle my shoulder. I was living like a full-on romance novel. Of course, my boring husband didn't even notice. I was suddenly happy all the time. One day I asked my husband if he had noticed the change in me, and he said, "You're being silly. What are you talking about?" And right there, that confirmed that my husband didn't even care that I was suddenly happier. He wasn't even bothering to ask why. Either way, his brother was staying with us until he found his own house. And guess what? He ended up moving in 2 houses away from ours. By the way, he also owns his own businesses, so he's really wealthy. He's tried to convince me to leave his brother, but I don't know. Sometimes I think my husband doesn't really like women, but I'm not sure. I know you guys will think it's easy to just get a divorce, but I don't want to break his heart either. But at the same time, I want to be happy too. What should I do? Help! Here's a day in my life in New York. On this day, I didn't have to go film the TV show, so I wanted to explore a little bit. I grabbed my vlogging camera because I've been vlogging for YouTube. I did wake up super bloated from the food I had yesterday. I had a bunch of Chipotle, so I had this probiotic yogurt. It is so good. Then I forced myself to go to the gym. I only had about 20 minutes, and I burned 185 calories. Then I put on this dress from Ragged Priest. I got a bunch of compliments on my outfit. I actually also filmed a story time and a YouTube video while I was doing this makeup look. And I had some mango before I headed off. I went to Sephora to look for my favorite perfume, but they didn't have it. Then I went into this clothing store and I ended up buying this dress. How cute is it? Then I met up with my best friend Ryan. We had dinner and then I went back to my hotel. I was super tired and that was it. Bye. Story time about how I dated my 30-year-old teacher when I was only 15. Disclaimer.